but God. These two words appear together in the Bible over 70 times. And so, but God is the incredible promise that we have one who loves us and intercedes for us. But God brings hope when we cannot see a way through. It means that ashes are not the end of our story. It says that it's not our circumstances that will get the very last word. And but God moments don't happen when the sun is shining and the birds are all chirping happily and we're sitting with a glass of lemonade while life just flows by smoothly. But God moments are those that require the Lord to step in. They come when we have run out of options. When all of our cleverness has been exhausted and when all of our resources have been depleted. When we feel weak and we're struggling to wiggle out of a tight spot has let us down. Now, the first time we see but God, and a moment of but God, is in the life of Noah and his family, while the entire world that they knew is underwater. Because it had never rained, not even once, before the great flood of Noah. And Noah and his family were set adrift on a boat with no way to steer. And the ark they were on was loaded down with animals upon a very vast expanse of water in every direction and as far as the eye could see. Everything had been blotted out. For 150 days, the water prevailed. In Genesis 7, we read these words, but God. But God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the cattle that were with him in the ark. And God caused a wind to pass over the earth, and the water subsided. The last time we gathered, a couple weeks ago, we talked about wind. We talked about wind being the Hebrew word ruach. It means the Holy Spirit, or the breath of life. Not only did God not forget about Noah and his family and their floating zoo, but the Holy Spirit got involved and he brought hope and he brought life to those who had no way of their own to bring about needed change. I mean, just imagine for a moment watching from inside the ark, rain pouring down for the first time, while the earth opens up and water begins to flow out from a very deep and almost bottomless well. You start to get rocked back and forth in the wind and upon the waves while watching every piece of land disappear. Now, being human, we would perhaps begin to think, in what can we place our hope in now? But being a believer, we can say, but God has promised to look after each one of us. But God has promised to care for us. He has promised to never leave us, nor forsake us. We find another but God moment in the Old Testament in the life of Joseph. Joseph was the son of Jacob. And Jacob favored Joseph over all of his other 10 brothers. And so he gave to Joseph this multicolored coat. And he kept Joseph from all of the harsh labor that all of the other brothers had to perform daily. And in Genesis 37, verse 4, it says, when Joseph's brothers saw than any of them. They hated him, and they could not speak a kind word to him. Jealousy, hatred had surfaced. And so all the brothers, they hatch a plan to get rid of Joseph. And they betrayed him. And they sold him for 20 pieces of silver to slave traders who were on their way to Egypt. And so Joseph is taken away to Egypt, and he's made a slave. And he ends up in prison for 11 years. But he receives his freedom by interpreting a dream of the Pharaoh of Egypt. Now, this dream had to do with 7 years of plenty of harvest, and then 7 years of famine. And so Joseph interpreted this dream with God's help. And because of that, Joseph is made second in command over all the land of Egypt. And one specific task that he's given is to be the manager of gathering and storing all of the grain during the 7 years of plenty to prepare for the 7 years of famine. And so this time of famine comes, as we know. And the whole then known world is plunged into a time of food insecurity. And it was only to Egypt that people could go to find and receive food, just to survive, all because of Joseph and his preparations. And so, Joseph, his brothers show up, and they want to buy food for Jacob, Joseph's father. And they want to buy food for all of their wives. And they want to buy food for their children. But 20 years have now passed since they betrayed Joseph and sold him into slavery. So they don't recognize Joseph. And Joseph puts his brothers through a series of trials and tests. And then he finally reveals himself to his brothers. And when he does, he invites Jacob, his father, and all of the wives of his brothers, and all of their children to come and live in Egypt. But then another 17 years pass, and Jacob dies. Jacob, Joseph's beloved father. And so all of his brothers begin to panic. And they say, oh, Joseph is going to hate us now, and he's going to take revenge on us now. Because they feel as if Joseph was only kind to them and their wives and all of their children because of his love for his father, Jacob. You know, sometimes when there is a present sorrow, other sorrows from our past can resurface and then regain ground in our hearts. And Jacob was worried about this too. So right before he died, he asked that some people would go to Joseph and say, Joseph, would you please forgive your brothers for their past wrongs against you? And Joseph hears this. And he goes to his brothers and he says, fear not. For am I in the place of God? As for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it for good. He brought me into this position so I can save the lives of many people. Okay, one more short, super short but God moment. And there's lots of them. But this one is similar to that of Joseph. Because Joseph is a shadow or a pattern or a type of Jesus Christ. Because we have all done things that were wrong in the past. We've all engaged in some form of wrong thinking. We've all engaged in wrong attitudes. And we too need forgiveness, like Joseph's brothers did. We too need our past sins to be overlooked, because God has a brand new story for us to live out. And just like Joseph's brothers couldn't meet the needs of their physical hunger, we cannot on our own receive much needed forgiveness from God. And so Romans chapter 5, verses 6 through 8 say this: "For at just the right time, while we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly." Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous man, though for a good man someone may possibly dare to die. But God proves his love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. It was not for those who were perfect. It was not for those who got it all figured out. It was not for those who got it all together that Christ came and gave of himself. But it was for the weak. It was for the broken. It was for the rebellious and the ungodly. It was for the people who were enemies of his kingdom that Christ died. But God proves his love from his heart. From the fullness of his own love, he gave the Son, Jesus Christ, for you and for I. The words "but God" to me are at the very heart of the gospel, because they mark a turning point where God overrides all of the human failure and all of the despair and all of the wrong intentions with his grace and with his mercy. And it turns complete defeat into victory.